7th at the Prime Osborne Convention Center. Opening night gala, lectures by renowned designers, and a children's fashion show. Learn more, firstcoastdesignshow.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, Democratic candidate for State Attorney General Jose Javier Rodriguez. We ask him about ghost candidates, power companies, and why he wants to be Florida's top cop. Then, what we keep and what we throw away. We meet the artist behind Mocha Jacksonville's new exhibit, Left Behind, Jacksonville native Whitney Oldenburg. And an endurance event to help sustain shelter for elders. We'll tell you how you can get involved. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org and discover all the ways you can connect with us. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump will attend the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum today in Washington. He'll be joined by Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, whom Trump is hosting. Several CEOs of large companies are expected to join them. The summit comes as the U.S. and Saudi Arabia say they're working on several deals. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben says there are a few details.
They agreed to cooperate on creating nuclear energy, to work together on AI. There was a defense agreement, which the White House said would make it easier for U.S. defense firms to operate in Saudi Arabia. The U.S. agreed to sell the Saudis F-35 fighter jets, and the White House announced Saudi Arabia is pledging to invest $1 trillion in the U.S. Now, that's a lot of stuff that they say they signed, but also there just haven't been a lot of details on those things yet.
NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reporting. U.S. intelligence says the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince approved the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018. Talking to journalists yesterday, President Trump defended the Crown Prince, saying Khashoggi was controversial. Khashoggi's widow has criticized the president's comments. Lawyers for former FBI Director James Comey will be in a Virginia courtroom today. They're seeking to persuade a federal judge to toss out his indictment, as NPR's Giles Snyder reports.
Comey's lawyers argue that the indictment accusing him of making a false statement and obstructing Congress should be dismissed because it's vindictive, that he's been singled out for prosecution by President Trump. Trump fired Comey in 2017 during his first term when Trump's campaign was being investigated by the FBI over potential ties to Russia. Comey has pleaded not guilty. The Justice Department is standing behind the allegations. However, on Monday, a different judge found what he said were profound investigative missteps by Lindsay Halligan. The former White House aide tapped to replace a veteran prosecutor who declined to bring charges against Comey and another prominent Trump critic, New York Attorney General Letitia James. Giles Snyder, NPR News.
Russia attacked 3 Ukrainian cities overnight. NPR's Hanna Palomarenko reports from Kyiv 20 people were killed.
The State Emergency Service is clearing the rubble, and a forensic laboratory is also working on the site to identify the victims. Ukrainian Air Force spokesman Yuri Ignat says Russia used about 470 drones and 48 missiles. Ignat saying the use of such weapons as ballistic and cruise missiles on cities is an act of terrorism that must be documented and reported to international legal institutions. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to urge allies to increase pressure on Russia to end its nearly 4-year war on Ukraine. Hanna Polomarenko, NPR News, Kyiv.
You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It is now 9:04. After almost 5 years of service, grocery giant Kroger is ending its home delivery of groceries in Florida this January. The company announced yesterday that it was ending the service and closing its Groveland, Florida distribution hub and 2 other spoke stations, including one in Jacksonville, eliminating 181 jobs locally. News partners at the Jacksonville Daily Record report most of the Jacksonville jobs eliminated are for delivery drivers for the Kroger-branded trucks. The company says its home delivery service will end on January 6th next year. Yesterday, Kroger also announced it was closing hub distribution sites in Maryland, Wisconsin, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. Heavy delays remain on the East Beltway southbound due to a crash on the Dames Point Bridge that has right lanes blocked. Those heavy delays start before you get to Alta Drive on the East Beltway southbound. And there are also some onlooker delays on the East Beltway northbound as you make your way over the bridge this hour. No rain in the forecast today here in northeast Florida as temperatures remain warm. Highs will reach the upper 70s for areas along the coast, low to mid 80s inland. Overnight, temperatures will drop down into the 50s to near 60 degrees. It'll be dry and quiet the next couple of days here in northeast Florida. Highs will reach the mid-80s each afternoon. Warm temperatures will continue through the weekend. And with this extended dry spell, officials are warning folks to be cautious when using outdoor flames.
This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include MS Now, home to The Rachel Maddow Show, Morning Joe, The Briefing with Jen Psaki, and more. MS Now is a source for news, opinion, and the world. Learn more at ms.now. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, Florida Attorney General candidate Jose Javier Rodriguez. We meet the Democrat seeking the role of the state's chief legal counsel. Later in the program, All That You Leave Behind. We talk to a homegrown artist whose new local exhibit examines our relationship with treasure and trash. But first,
I'm running to be your Attorney General because Florida needs somebody in its corner.
my guest has held multiple roles in state and federal politics. He's seeking the seat once held by current U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, here to tell us what he'd do if he won is Jose Javier Rodriguez. Nice to have you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So I'm mixing up your predecessors. Of course, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi is now U.S. Attorney General. Former Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody is now a senator. So this seat is currently occupied by an appointed position, by a person appointed by our governor. Tell us a little bit about the role of Attorney General, what it is, what it does, and why you think you would make a good one.
Well, thanks for the question. So I'm running for Florida Attorney General to be the people's lawyer. That is what the job is. You're supposed to be an independent, advocate for the people of Florida. Oftentimes, people mistakenly compare this office with its federal counterpart. It is a very different job. State attorneys general is one of the oldest offices in state constitutional government. Back in England, it used to be the king's attorney, but when the states became sovereign and the people became sovereign, when became a democracy, it's the people's lawyer. It is not the governor's lawyer. The attorney general does have a role in helping provide legal advice and regulatory advice for state agencies, but fundamentally, you're supposed to be an independent advocate for the people. That is why I'm running. That's what I'm running to serve as. We haven't had one that has fulfilled that role for a very long time. The current attorney general is the least independent we've had in a long time, and I'm running to restore the AG's office to the people. And I can talk about some of the priorities that I have in doing so.
Sure. And so you mentioned the current attorney general, and of course, he worked for the governor, Ron DeSantis, both in a campaign capacity when the governor was seeking the presidency, and then he worked as his chief of staff So now James Uthmeier is Attorney General. And when you say that the job is being the people's lawyer, what kind of representation do people need? Like, practically speaking, how does that work?
I love that you asked the question. So the price. So it's great to be here in Jacksonville, making my way all around the state, talking to to all voters, and I'm talking about three of my priorities. The three C's are the core of how people will see their lives improved if I'm Attorney General. I'm going to tackle crime, costs, and corruption. So when it comes to crime, just restoring a focus on public safety. There's a lot of politicking that comes out of the AG's office. Number two, costs. The Attorney General's office, when I'm there, will go after abusive practices by insurance that artificially inflate rates, practices in housing, for example, corporate landlords. I'll go after utilities. I'll also enforce the minimum wage. All of these things are things that are part of the AG's job, but have not been done in a long time, if ever, out of the Attorney General's office. And corruption, right? When I talk about corruption, I served in the state legislature, and I gained a reputation as somebody who was taking on some of the most powerful interests in the state when they're taking advantage of us. And I think when I talk about corruption, what I really mean is those big, powerful interests that get whatever they want in Tallahassee, and nobody's looking out for them. So that is the role of the Attorney General. It requires that you be able to stand up to people in your own party. It requires that you be able to stand up against the most powerful interests in the state, whether they be corporations or other institutions. That's what my entire career has been, and that's what I would do as Attorney General. That is the job.
And so prior to currently seeking office, you worked in the Biden administration in the Labor Department. But before that, you were in both the House, the Florida State House, and the Senate. And you talk about corruption because the way that you lost your seat was really embroiled in a scandal, not of your own making, but one that was basically built to undermine your tenure. So I want to talk to you about that a little bit. We on this program have talked previously about this ghost candidate scandal that emerged in the last election cycle. And it was kind of a trail of dark money that was used to essentially hire someone with your name to put on the ballot. It was another Rodriguez. It was put on the ballot to siphon off votes, and it ended up being successful. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what it was like to experience that and to realize that that a challenger had been sort of deliberately created to, in a very narrow margin, in a very close race, cost you the election?
Yeah. So what happened was Republican operatives later came out with the financial support of Florida Power and Light, ran a corrupt scheme to do two things. One is to bribe a candidate with the same last name, Rodriguez, to run as an independent, as a shill candidate, and then violating campaign finance laws to put hundreds of thousands of dollars of dark money behind some last minute ads for this shill candidate on issues that I had worked on, including the minimum wage, which I mentioned earlier. And so in an election where 250,000 votes were cast, I lost by 32 votes after a recount. Now, what's important about this, I talk about corruption. This is the type of corruption that I'm talking about. But I could talk about what it was like for me, but the victims here were the voters, right? Because the voters deserve to know that the candidates on the ballot are actual real candidates, and they deserve, and they deserve to know, and frankly, most often as journalists, deserve to know where the money's coming from that is promoting candidates. And it took quite some time to be able to figure that out. And I do want to commend the Miami State Attorney's Office, who did a tremendous job. They got a conviction. It's on appeal, but they got a conviction, number of pleas, and they did an incredible job investigating and really bringing to light what occurred. And so even though the voters were the victims, I was the target. And I think what I like to talk about on the campaign trail is, why was I targeted? Well, it came out that, through discovery in a separate civil proceeding, that the CEO of FPL had it out for me. And for good reason, because there was nobody else standing up for the forced customers of our electric utilities more than I was in Tallahassee. I was a thorn in their side. They're constantly trying to shift costs onto consumers, constantly trying to just take over everything. And I had filed a bill about allowing for more competition, right? You know,
It was essentially rooftop solar, right?
Rooftop
It would have
solar,
allowed
yeah.
people who have panels on their house to sell excess electricity either back to the grid or to tenants or neighbors.
Exactly. So it wasn't the complete opening up of solar that a lot of us would want, but it was at least the version where an apartment complex or like a strip mall could put up solar panels and sell electricity to their tenants, right? I mean, it's a great way to promote solar. And FPL and others were dead set against this. We had a big coalition in support of it, but I'd advocated for that bill multiple years. We'd got hearings on it. We were gaining momentum. And I filed it that particular year. And so the CEO of FPL's, emails all these political operatives that did this. And he says, hey, we've got to make his life a living hell. Right. So they were targeting me for it. And so I think that's an important thing. Because again, that's what I will bring to state government once elected.
This email from the CEO then, Eric Slaggy, basically, it literally did say, quote, I want you to make his life a living hell, seriously. And very, moments later, the couple of, people at this powerful consulting firm sort of sprang into action. And, soon after that, this fake candidate got $45,000 or $50,000 to put his name on the ballot to challenge you.
Right. And what has been done, other than the Miami State Attorney's Office, no one in government has done anything about this. Now, I want to say a number of people in our federal delegation, a number of people in our in state government have stood up on this, right? But in terms of who controls Tallahassee, it's the same interests that did this, right? And so again, this is the same kind of corrupt game that continues coming out of Tallahassee, and it's what I'm running to stop on behalf of the people. Because again, the point is that FPL wants to make more money out of forced customers, right? They're asked right now. I was just in Tallahassee, speaking against, and when I was in the legislature, I battled against these nonstop rate increases coming out. And they're asking for the biggest rate increase of any utility in the country ever, and the biggest guaranteed profit of any utility. Our attorney general is nowhere to be found. That didn't used to be the case. We at least had attorney generals that would intervene, if not investigate and sue. But it's that's why I'm running, because they get whatever they want in Tallahassee, and that needs to stop.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Jose Javier Rodriguez about his bid to become Florida's next attorney general. You can join our conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937 or go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the ways that you can connect with us. We have an email from Steve. He says, with the current federal administration removing and dismantling many environmental protections, what could you do at the state level to protect the land, water, air, and wildlife of Florida?
That's a fantastic question. So from the Attorney General's vantage point, again, your job is to protect the people of Florida, right? And so if people are polluting our children with fentanyl, or they're polluting our waters with these algae blooms, it is the Attorney General's job to step up. Now, we started off by saying, we haven't had an Attorney General who's really done the job in a very long time. But one of the things that, we have laws on the books about polluters paying for the cost of cleaning up what they've done. And that does not generally happen here, right? That would change as Attorney General. And so I think, that would be my answer to the question, is that absolutely it is the Attorney General's job, and it's something that I would bring to the office.
And we know, your position on environmental issues has been in some ways very manifest. For a while, you would wear boots for, I think, a couple of successive legislative sessions that had a kind of a hashtag message on them, specifically to draw attention to the peril of climate change in Florida, and particularly South Florida, where you represented.
That's right. So my background, I'm Catholic, and stewardship of what we're given is a real important thing for me. When I campaigned, I originally ran for the State House. It was a lot about, economic mobility and opportunity. I am not, my wife is an environmentalist professionally. I am not. And I mentioned the Catholic piece because, sometimes converts are the most fervent advocates. And so when I finally realized that the state government was doing virtually nothing to protect us from the impacts of climate, and at that time, absolutely nothing when it came to the causes of climate, right, which is about clean energy, and we could talk about that separately. But when it came from the impacts of climate, I was like, I don't understand how this is an ideological, much less a partisan issue. So I got to work trying to figure out what can we get through this legislature to deal with climate impacts. And so a part of that strategy was I wore big rubber rain boots for 3 years at the state capitol during all of my legislative work. That's not something I would ever do as an attorney general, but in this role, it was funny because everybody in my life, my family, my staff, everybody thought, please don't do this. But it actually worked because every single one of my colleagues knew all the bills that were available to be heard to do something for our residents, because they'd come and all make fun of me, it was like this, friendly making fun of me,
Yeah.
right? But it was a great opportunity to make sure that everybody knew what was available to be heard. And, it took 3 years, but we finally did get the first legislation passed to directly deal with climate, like actually require state government to do something on climate. And
which bill was that?
I don't remember the bill number, but because it's been years now. And the bill's been amended a couple times to fix it, and we worked closely with the Department of Environmental Protection to do it, and they were great on it. And what the bill does is it requires any state money that's being spent in the coastal building zone to go through a process where we plan. Like, so for example, if a local government is building something on the coast with state dollars, they've got to show that they have a plan to account for all the things that will be coming down the road, right? And
Including flooding forecasts.
flooding, storms, all those things, right? And so it has multiple impacts, but that was the core piece of the legislation. And again, part of the reason why we broke through is that my message was, we're just sitting here and waiting for these impacts to come on us, on future generations. Let's get in and do something to protect people. And so, again, as running as Attorney General, your job is to look out for people and to protect them. So it's the same sort of thing. But as Attorney General, I would not be a policymaker. I'd be enforcing the laws, and those laws that require polluters to pay so that we can do some of these things, that would be a big focus.
We've got an email from Denise. She says, how is he going to investigate rate hikes by insurance companies when DeSantis accepted over $4 million from the insurance lobby for his campaign? And speaking of corruption, is he going to investigate the transfer of $10 million in Medicaid funds to Casey DeSantis' so-called foundation? That, of course, is Hope Florida, that second one. And that currently is being investigated by a grand jury. So, you answer that if you choose. But as to the rate hikes for insurance companies, let's talk a little bit about that. It seemed that in March there was some motivation by the part of lawmakers in this state to investigate what appeared to be kind of misleading claims by the insurance industry, where they said, look, we're losing all this money. That's why we have to hike rates. That's why we have to move out of state or stop insuring customers because because of these enormous costs. And then this paperwork emerged that showed that they had actually created some adjacent companies, were funneling their profits into these adjacent companies so that their balance sheets showed losses. And in March, the Republican-led legislature seemed really fired up about this. An investigation was called for. What happened with that, and what should happen?
Yeah, so I think a lot of your listeners will be shocked to hear, I'm obviously being, ironic here, that the insurance companies are doing these kind of things. Unfortunately, in Tallahassee, they're taken at their word most of the time. And what we get out of Tallahassee is, they'll express outrage. Sometimes they'll say a few things and then they hope the thing disappears. It tends to be what they try to do. So I want to come back to, I'm running for Attorney General. I'm not running for governor. It's an independent office. So whoever is governor, if I'm Attorney General, I will bring that kind of independence to the job, right? And whether they're from the same party or not, if there are practices that are illegal and taking advantage of people, absolutely. And probably number one on the list, frankly, is insurance, not just property insurance, but I think we're talking primarily about property insurance. And so the Attorney General's office has the power to investigate, has the power to bring suit. And those are absolutely powers that I would use that have not been used for a very long time when it comes to insurance. And you talk about these shell games, right? So these shell games where they move they use, corporate tricks to move their money outside of state or into, different vehicles. And then they cry poor when it's time to pay claims, right? Or when they're trying to get rate increases. This is very well known. Everybody in Tallahassee knows they do this. What are they doing about it, right? Now, as Attorney General, I can't change the laws. I can enforce them. But you bet that I will, because, we need relief in Florida, right? It can, in part, come from the Attorney General's office, and that is absolutely going to be a focus to look at these things, investigate, and bring suit. Because some of these insurance companies, they're small operations in the grand scheme of things, but somehow their CEOs make millions, like the kind of salaries that global insurance companies pay their CEOs. And then when it's time to pay claims, somehow they can't afford anything. It's obscene. It's in broad daylight, and they don't do anything in Tallahassee. That'll change when I'm Attorney General.
When you talk about the job of AG as somebody who has to, create the laws, you have to enforce the laws. What happens when the laws that are on the books are laws that you don't agree with? Some of the laws that have been, passed by this legislature or that this governor has prioritized in terms of enforcement, things like immigration. What do you do as AG if you are opposed ideologically or morally to the laws that you're tasked with enforcing?
As Attorney General, as you mentioned, you don't make the laws, right? And so if there is a law that I believe is unconstitutional, I will take that to the courts, right? Because the courts are the ones who decide that. The other issue, the other kind of thing that comes into play is prosecutorial discretion, right? Which is that with limited resources, you want to focus on those things that are going to be most beneficial to the people of Florida, right? And so that's one of the things that's really important is again, there's just laws that have just never been enforced because, we have an Attorney General who chooses to support the powerful and not the people. But when it comes to deciding what the law is, that is absolutely not the Attorney General's job, and that will not be my job, right? If there's a law that I don't like, for example, there are limited things that I can do. I can take that to court and other things like that. But frankly, it is what it is, right? So, for example, our current Attorney General has been celebratory about a particular interpretation of open carry, right? Now, we have a ban on open carry of firearms in the state. Our prior Attorney General sort of did an about face at one point, decided to stop defending that law. The current Attorney General gleefully said that he would stop defending that law. And so whatever the courts decide on that, would be the law. But as Attorney General, I would absolutely be defending that law, appealing rulings, and I think in addition to that role, our current Attorney General has been celebratory about this, right? So no matter what the result would be from the courts about open carry, I would be working with law enforcement, with communities, with local governments to make sure that they understand how this, what's the landscape? How is this going to work? How do we make sure that we protect people and keep them safe? Because, of course, there's a lot of concern from a lot of people. Sure. Some people think we're not culturally ready yet for that if it were to come to pass. But this Attorney General has just been celebratory about it. That is, you're not a member of Congress, right? You're an Attorney General, right? You're supposed to be shepherding us through this to make sure that we are safe. And that is absolutely not the tack he has taken.
In terms of communicating with law enforcement, there's been another issue that this current Attorney General has been in trouble over, which is the interpretation over enforcement of certain immigration laws, and basically under court order, to stay some of the policies that were in place that were driving immigration enforcement. The judge said, we're going to put these on hold. This AG basically told law enforcement, I can't tell you not to enforce the law, and ultimately was held in contempt of court by a federal judge.
Yeah. So if we're going to talk about the Attorney General's missteps, to put it lightly. With what your caller did ask about the Hope Florida scandal, and I do hope we get a chance to talk about that. But yeah, what you're referring to is there was a state law that a court, as you mentioned, put a stay on, right, because it was being challenged as unconstitutional. And as part of that process, initially, the Attorney General told state law enforcement to abide by that. And then he went on a bunch of podcasts and decided that he was going to change his opinion, and then essentially told state law enforcement that they didn't have to comply with a court order. And he was eventually held in civil contempt. Again, the chief legal officer in the state of Florida being held in contempt because he couldn't find his way to telling state agencies they had to comply with a federal court order. I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around, but that is exactly the kind of attorney general we currently have.
So let's talk a little bit about Hope Florida, because I mean, as far as the First Lady's involvement, that's not something that would involve the role of AG, but this current attorney general has been involved more than peripherally in this matter, because he was overseeing some of these political action committees that were fighting a couple of measures that the governor opposed, including abortion and recreational marijuana.
Right.
And so the money that was supposed to be coming back as kind of a overpayment from the state to a Medicaid provider went to these PACs in some capacity. And that's the root of this investigation. So what is your take on his involvement? What is your concern, if any, about what he's done?
Well, so the Hope Florida scandal at core is that the governor's team, including Uthmeier, who's at the center of it because he was at that time the chief of staff, that it looks like $10 million that should have gone into the Medicaid program, right, for sick kids, et cetera, state money, was siphoned and filtered through a couple different vehicles to end up being used in the electoral process, right, to campaign against the abortion and marijuana amendments. And this is a scandal in and of itself. You've had Republican subcommittee chairs in the House essentially made a criminal referral from the dais, right? They said, looks like some multiple crimes have been committed here. The scheme is under criminal investigation right now. But, the reason for concern, there's multiple reasons for concern, but this is part of a larger scandal, which is that, again, it looks like something to the tune of about $35 to $40 million of taxpayer money through multiple different operations was filtered into campaigns that year to campaign against marijuana and abortion. And there doesn't seem to be any modern precedent for that sort of thing, right? And one of the pots of money that they grabbed, frankly, was this $10 million that was supposed to come back to the Medicaid program. It was a multi-state settlement. I think the total was about $67 million. $10 million of that was supposed to come back to the Medicaid program in Florida. And again, they siphoned it to use in campaigns. I talk about the Attorney General's job about being an advocate for the people, being independent. I can differ with past Attorney Generals in terms of their policies, their places of emphasis. But this current Attorney General is literally doing the opposite of what the job demands. Rather than rooting out corruption, he is the root of corruption in Tallahassee.
And we should say that we reached out on Monday of this week to James Uthmeier and his people and invited him on the program. And we have not yet gotten a response, but we hope that we will soon to be able to talk to him. So just on a personal level, I'd like to just get to know you a little better personally. I mean, this is an office that hasn't been in Democratic hands since Bob Butterworth back in the early aughts. So just give us an idea of sort of where you come to, being a Democrat in a race that heavily favors Republicans, and a little bit about, your personal ambition here.
Sure. So, on my personal, so I grew up in Miami, bilingual, bicultural. My wife and I live there now. We have, 2 young kids. The way that I was raised was to stand up to bullies and, don't let somebody pick on somebody else. So that's really kind of oriented a lot of my legal career. I started working. I went to Harvard Law, came back home to Miami, and I worked as a legal aid lawyer. In fact, a lot of the people that I know best here in Jacksonville are legal aid lawyers that were from back in the days. And actually, coming into the studio, I met somebody I had seen in 15 years. It's because they're a legal aid
He's
lawyer.
going to be on in just a couple
Oh,
minutes.
okay, there you go. But so so really, in terms of what motivates me, and those folks that have helped me, mentored me, helped form me. I mentioned, being Catholic. That's a big part of my identity is sort of that social gospel of really standing up for people and helping people out. That is how I see the Attorney General's job, right? To get in there and stand up for people, in this case, taxpayers, Floridians. And, you mentioned the partisan piece. And, one of the reasons why I was elected and reelected in a state house seat and a state senate seat that were swing districts was because I was focused on the issues that really impacted people, right? Low-income condo owners, workers, students. And none of the issues that I've talked about here today are particularly partisan, right? When I'm out there talking about tackling crime, tackling costs, talking corruption, my 3 C's, those are not partisan issues. And it's one of the reasons why you see popular attorney generals in some red states that are Democrats, because they focus on the issues that matter to the state. And they're not, just trying to get headlines and attention in D.C. And the current attorney general, so much of what he has been doing really seems designed for consumption in Washington and not here, right? This mass detention center in the Everglades, for example, that they marketed as, alligator Alcatraz. I mean, everything about that is about Washington, D.C. None of that is about Florida, right? If you want to talk about enforcing immigration policy, let's have that conversation. But this cruel celebratory thing where they try to, for those of us in South Florida, the Everglades is a place we hunt and fish and recreate, but they make it seem like Jurassic Park. Well, nobody in Florida buys that if you've been to the Everglades, right? But outside of here, they're like, oh, the alligators, et cetera. So again, not to make light of it, but the whole point is that so much of what you see coming out of that office is not for consumption here in Florida. And so I think my campaign is going to be talking to all voters about Florida issues, and not those, not that political theater that we see out of Tallahassee.
Well, Jose Javier Rodriguez, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Up next, an exhibit exploring the powerful relationship between humans and their objects. We talk to artist Whitney Oldenburg. Welcome back. Well, our next guest is a homegrown artist whose work explores the cost of consumption on both our planet and our person. Here to tell us about it is Whitney Oldenburg, featured artist at Mocha Jacksonville's new exhibit, Whitney Oldenburg Left Behind. Good morning, Whitney.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Ilva Rouse, the museum's senior curator. Ilva, welcome back.
Thank you.
Very
Happy
nice
to
to
be
have
here.
you. Yeah, I'm glad
Yes.
to have you. And so this is a neat occasion to celebrate, to have a artist who was born in Jacksonville, who now lives in New York, but who is, headlining essentially this major exhibition at Mocha. So Whitney, this is, I think, the first institutional survey of your work. Can you tell us kind of what the significance is of that, what that means to you, and to also be having it here in Jacksonville?
Yeah, it's an incredible opportunity. Typically, it doesn't quite happen very often for someone at my age to have an institutional show this large. So there's 43 artworks from the last 10 years of my life. So it's kind of a huge show. which I make very large sculpture as well. So I actually haven't seen all my work together, which is an incredible opportunity as an artist as well, because that's how you really learn from seeing your work together. And in your small, tiny studio, you don't always get to see things and step back from it and see how they work as a group.
How interesting. What an
Yeah.
interesting perspective. And so, as she mentioned, this is 23 sculptures and 19 drawings. Ilva, how do you kind of select from a body of work? Where do you get it from? Are you having to kind of borrow this from other places?
No, we actually were able to get it from. Whitney's laughing from her small studio. She, of course, has a storage in New York. The space is not available. And her galleries.
Yeah. And how do you choose which pieces
Well, for me, it was important to show Whitney's evolution. So the weight is on her recent work. In fact, she was working on them until the days before we
Yeah.
picked up, which was very nerve-wracking for me. But it's also exciting.
Yeah, because it's all kind of new.
Yes.
Uh-huh. And so, Whitney, for people who are watching our live stream, they'll be able to see some of the imagery that is going to be on display and some of your work in general. But you work in these really beautiful textiles, but they're very complicated and layered. And I guess the materials that you're using really come from a broad, scope of things, a variety of places. Tell us a little bit about where you find the objects, what kind of materials you're incorporating.
Yeah. So I use everything from rock, resin, clay, but I also use Tylenol, ice trays, matches, nail files. So domestic goods, things that people consume, as well as kind of sculptural materials.
And when you're putting these items together, there's some messaging, I guess, involved in terms of, what you're choosing and how you're trying to represent our relationship with things. Can you talk a little bit about, what it is that you see when you look at the array of kind of consumables out there and how on our relationship with them?
Yeah, it's kind of, I feel like in the last, I don't know, 30 years, our consumption has just exploded. And so you see documentaries of, where our waste is sent to, countries in Africa, and you see just constant consumption and waste. And then you hear in the news about how we're all, consuming microplastics. And while there is that element of climate change, there's also, I think of it as sort of like a coping, as somebody, when they're surviving, they want to gather and accumulate things, or if they're, feeling a sort of, trying to deal with a certain pain, they want to have even something like coffee every day, like, oh, I need my coffee to get through the day. But I think it's become kind of more interesting because I think the more that this is occurring, humans are also being mutated in some senses. I think that people our age are getting cancer at higher rates. But also it could lead to exciting things. I think this kind of constant adaptation, constant change, but this cycle of producing, consuming, waste, a sort of life and death cycle as well, I find to be really interesting. So that's kind of things I think about.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I mean, while it can be exciting, I understand that there's also this idea that this cycle can be kind of flattening of the human experience. I know that
Yeah.
you've expressed concern that the way that we consume things can have an effect on us, and not so much like on our planet or even our physical health, but just kind of on our humanity or our psychology.
Yeah. I think that people underestimate humans' ability to connect with inanimate objects. So, like, if you think about a child and a teddy bear, um, like I had a little stuffed animal and I was convinced it was real, so I think you can draw attachments to things as a form of comfort or coping, but in a way that kind of can take you further from connecting with others or connecting on a sort of deeper levels. And it's really, I think also about kind of the production of items as well, and kind of the movement of items throughout the world. So, say for instance, sneakers might be produced in China, however many, hands have, touched a particular sneaker, and then the shipping of the sneaker, and then the purchasing of the sneaker, and then, how cool someone feels that their sneakers are, whether or not it impacts their single life. And then beyond that, kind of tossing the sneakers and getting 10 more sneakers. It's sort of this constant cycle of just producing, consuming, and then discarding. Yeah.
Ilva, who does Whitney's work remind you of? I mean, do you see some natural antecedents to the stuff that she produces?
Absolutely. So Whitney belongs to a compelling group of contemporary female sculptors that are working right now, and they're all kind of working with materiality and organic forms, and often intertwined with ecology, like Whitney, or personal or community experience, and it's quite interesting and exciting for us to be able to show this trend with a Jacksonvillian.
Yeah. How important is it for people who come to the exhibit to sort of understand all of the foundation, that's in Whitney's head, to appreciate her artwork?
That's a good question. I don't think so. There's a lot there, that's a lot of layers, but in itself, the sculpture is just a wondrous world of organic forms that you experience on a very sensorial level. It's going to be great fun for kids because they are creatures.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you interact with, and I love that too. That too for the not only kids but also grown-ups to develop that sensuous side.
Yeah. Whitney, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of people that sort of repurpose things and make some kind of art that isn't always necessarily really pleasing to look at, but your artwork is very, aesthetically beautiful. It doesn't, you don't have like popsicle sticks sticking out of it or anything that's like identifiable in a way that detracts from just the look of the piece.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you approach incorporating things that are perhaps not, that are disposed of, and making them something beautiful?
Well, I think, I think if I've always liked art or that I am attracted to, I do think there's also an element of like attraction and repulsion that I like to play with, and a sort of pleasure and pain. So I think it's important to I like kind of drawing in the audience. I like that kids. I love it when kids like my work, and so I think it's important to me to have that element to my work. I think the transformative part element is also important. Like the idea of becoming, transforming, change, adaptation are all things I think about. So it's sort of, even if it's something like lollipop sticks or Tylenol, I like it when somebody is kind of enamored with it and then is like, oh my gosh.
Like with it, almost like a double take.
Yeah,
Yes.
I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Part of it.
Do you have a favorite piece in this exhibit?
I haven't asked you that.
I have a few favorites. And then I think I like Hopes and Dreams, and
Is that a sculpture?
yep. And
It's a wall sculpture.
A wall sculpture, okay.
yep. And I think This Person I Know I really like. And maybe Feeding Frenzy. I'm still the new sculptures. It takes me a while. I have to look at them for a while, just see what I think about them.
Yeah. Well, I know it'll be a treat for people who know you here to be able to see your work all together. I'm sure you're excited as well.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Whitney Oldenburg, it's a pleasure to meet you. Ilva, this opening celebration and preview is on Thursday, so tomorrow from 6 to 9, and then a community hour from 8 to 9. But of course, it'll be on display till April 19th. So
Yes.
an opportunity. All right. Well, Ilva Rouse, Whitney Oldenburg, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you, as always.
Up next, a chance to get moving in order to prevent elders from having to do so. We'll tell you about how to help the Shelter Elders fundraiser.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com. The Women's Board benefiting Wolfson Children's Hospital presents the 2025 First Coast Design Show, December 5th through 7th at the Prime Osborne Convention Center. Antique art and garden dealers from around the region and vignettes and tablescapes from interior designers. Learn more at 904-202-2886.
For more than 40 years, he's brought to life the stories of America. Now, Ken Burns turns his lens to the struggle that created America.
Ken Burns presents The American Revolution, tonight at 8 on Jax PBS and the PBS app.
JP Morgan is one of the world's largest banks, and the company has announced it will fundamentally rewire for the AI age. JP Morgan plans on automating every behind-the-scenes process and have every client experience curated with AI concierges. So how could this $830 billion company's embrace of so-called agentic AI change banking for everyone? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
COP30, the UN Climate Conference, wraps up this week in Brazil. Political leaders, activists, scientists, and business lobbyists have convened, but not there, the Trump administration. What does the U.S. government's absence mean for the future of COP? And a decade after the Paris Agreement, what is there left to negotiate? The future of global climate policy, next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. It's an endurance race, always for a good cause, and this year it's to fund services for seniors in need. Here to tell us about the annual Freed to Run Challenge is founder and attorney Mike Freed. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Jim Kowalski, president and CEO of Jacksonville Area Legal Aid. Jim, nice to see you again.
Thanks for having us.
So, Mike, you are an endurance runner, and you founded this Freed to Run Challenge originally in 2016. It has evolved over time in terms of who, it targets, who it benefits. Tell us a little bit about how you selected this Shelter for Elders endowment.
Yeah, so after 7 years of doing the event, which was 6 marathons over 6 days to raise money for indigent pediatric patients and their families, we succeeded in helping to fully fund that endowment at $2.25 million. And we could have, sort of said we did what we set out to do, but it was such a good fundraising vehicle, brought awareness to the great work that Jacksonville Area Legal Aid and Legal Aid in general does. And so we consulted with Jim at Jacksonville Area Legal Aid and said, what's another unfunded need that you have? And we were we learned that it was indigent seniors dealing with housing insecurity and consumer fraud. So 2 years ago, this will be the third year. We started 6 marathons. Now it's a 24-hour run around the Duval County Courthouse, plus a complimenting bicycle ride from the St. Johns County Courthouse. And we benefit indigent seniors. And Jim was just telling me we're about $500,000 into that endowment.
Sweet. And what is the goal?
The goal, again, is another $2.25 million. We're partnered with the Dolores Bar Weaver Legacy Fund and the Community Foundation, and we've got some other great matching sponsors. And, Jim could tell you about the model, but basically it's to create sustainable legal aid for constituents that need it. And by putting money in an endowment, we use the interest to support the program in perpetuity.
Gotcha. And Jim, so talk about the need that elders have. This is specifically around elder housing. And obviously, Jacksonville Area Legal Aid does a lot with trying to protect people in their housing, prevent them from losing housing. But what are some of the specific challenges that seniors face?
So all of the issues that we deal with in Florida, from the insurance affordability issue to general housing affordability, impact seniors more than anyone else. So, for example, if you're a senior in a reverse mortgage and you need repairs, you need your roof replaced so that your insurance company will then write your homeowner's coverage, you no longer have the income to do that. But if you don't have your roof replaced and you don't keep your homeowner's coverage, you're breaching your reverse mortgage, and you actually can be the victim or subject of a reverse mortgage foreclosure.
Wow.
So that's a very traditional use where our services come in and represent those seniors in those sorts of cases. But these days, it's much more expansive. As Mike talked about, consumer fraud, we deal with door-to-door scams after the hurricanes when the roofers flood the neighborhoods. All of those issues, solar, PACE, all of those dramatically over affect our seniors. Number one, they're the most attractive targets for these scammers, these door-to-door, because they don't have traditionally a lot of support network, and because so much of the initial interface, the financing, is done digitally. They're being asked to sign an iPad. They're not given opportunities to read it. They may not understand it, even if they did have the opportunity to read it on the tiny iPad or iPhone screen. All of those, and then they're also, again, they're just very attractive targets. Seniors have always been attractive targets for scams, and now the scams are better and more affecting their housing.
And so this fund, the money is raised, Mike, because people commit to a lot of activities. So these are laps that are run or walked around the Duval County Courthouse, which is a half-mile lap per lap. And so they kind of get people to sponsor them for that. But then there's this other component, which is this ride if you want to hop on your bike down at the St. Johns County Courthouse and pedal to the Duval County Courthouse.
Correct. Yeah, it's a pretty unique experience, starting with the bike ride, which Jim has been part of every one. He brought one of our singlets, I believe they call them.
They are called jerseys, but
jerseys. Sorry,
jerseys.
I was all.
Yeah,
but,
the Free to Run Challenge jersey that he's got there.
So we take good care of our runners and our bicyclists, and I want to make sure everybody knows it's free. You register and you come out and you join the bike ride, or you join the run, or of course come out and support people. The goal is to get people to donate, or to get others to donate for the extraordinary efforts that they're putting in. And you can run, you can walk, you can obviously do the bike ride, which starts at the St. Johns County Courthouse and goes to the Duval County Courthouse with a full police escort. Costs you nothing.
Yeah, and so you've also this year added a couple of comfort stations around the courthouse. There's just basically like one at each corner where people can stop in, get a break, get some water if they need.
Yeah, trying to create sort of a tailgate party atmosphere. Campers RV has come on board in a big way as a sponsor. They're putting 4 campers, one on each corner, so runners can rest and people can stay in the campers and cheer them on. And it lights up the course a little better as well.
Yeah. Well, the event is a 24-hour period. It begins Saturday at 11 a.m. It goes through Sunday, November 22nd and 23rd. And there's also a 5K that starts on Sunday at 11 a.m. But we have a link on our website if you're interested. Mike Freed, Jim Kowalski, thanks so much for doing this today. And thanks for the fundraising that you're doing.
Thanks for supporting us.
Yes, and thank you.
All right. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have comments or suggestions, you can send either to comments at firstcoastconnect.org. While you're there, you can sign up to get daily show news, including a breakdown of upcoming guests and topics delivered to your inbox every weekday morning. Or actually, every weekday at 4 o'clock. Sorry about that. It's our deadline. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our show is directed by Brady Corum, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow when we meet a Jacksonville man using social media to bridge the city's cultural and political divide. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. WJCT Public Media is supported by the United Church UCC DOC and Quakers in St. Augustine, an open and affirming community rooted in social justice. More information at uccsa.org and St. Augustine Quakers.